High IQ people do not get drained by stupid people because they lack intelligence. They get drained because they keep treating stupidity like a misunderstanding, so they explain, they simplify, they bring facts, they stay patient longer than they should. And somehow, the other person does not become clearer. They become louder, more certain, more offended. That is the trap. You are trying to solve an ego problem with an information solution. Schopenhauer saw this brutal truth long before modern psychology gave it a name. Many people do not argue to discover truth. They argue to protect the part of themselves that truth would humiliate. Once ego replaces curiosity, logic becomes useless. Worse, it becomes expensive. Every explanation costs you attention. Every correction costs you energy. Every attempt to be understood gives them another chance to drain you. And once you understand that, you stop trying to win the argument. You start protecting your mind. But before we go further, understand the target. Stupidity here does not mean a lack of education. It does not mean someone who learns slowly. It does not mean a person who has never been given the chance to know better. That is honest ignorance. And honest ignorance can be taught. Willful stupidity is different. Willful stupidity protects itself from being taught. It hears correction as disrespect. It hears evidence as attack. It hears nuance as weakness. And yes, if you are truly intelligent, you must ask the most uncomfortable question first. Could I be the fool here? Because the moment you believe stupidity only lives in other people, you are already standing inside your own blind spot. But once that question has been asked honestly, Schopenhauer's warning begins. Some people are not confused. They are defended. They are not looking for truth. They are guarding the identity they built around being right. This is where high IQ people get trapped. They see patterns quickly. They notice contradictions before the sentence is even finished. They hear the missing premise, the false assumption, the emotional distortion hiding under the argument, so they make a very reasonable mistake. They assume the other person will see it too, if the explanation is clear enough. So they try again. They bring facts. They use examples. They change the wording. They make the argument softer, shorter, cleaner, more patient. They write 3 careful paragraphs in a comment section, and the other person replies with one smug sentence that proves they understood nothing. They explain a medical symptom they have already lived through, and the other person dismisses it, only to experience the exact same symptom later and still deny the connection. They spend years on forums, in family conversations, in workplace debates trying to educate people who were never actually asking to be educated. And this is the intelligence trap. The smarter you are, the more dangerous this trap becomes, because you can always think of one more way to explain what should have been obvious. You believe the failure is in your delivery. It is not. The trap is not that you think too much. The trap is that you think they think like you. Psychology gives part of this a name, the Dunning-Kruger effect. Some people do not merely lack skill or knowledge. They lack the metacognition to recognize the limits of their own understanding. So when you offer correction, they do not experience it as help. They experience it as interference. You are trying to reach truth. They are trying to protect certainty. That is why you leave exhausted. Not because you failed to explain, but because you were speaking to someone who did not enter the conversation with the same goal. Schopenhauer's brutal truth was simple. Most people do not argue to find truth. They argue to protect the image they have of themselves. That is why logic fails in the exact moment it should work. You think you are giving them new information. They hear a threat. You think you are correcting an error. They feel you lowering their status. You think you are clarifying reality. They feel reality turning against them. To a fragile ego, correction does not feel like information. It feels like humiliation. And once humiliation enters the room, truth has already lost the first battle. Now watch what happens. They stop answering the point. They attack your tone. They call you arrogant. They call you negative. They call you difficult. They say you are overthinking. They say you are not a team player. In a meeting, you bring a clear warning, and your boss dismisses it with, "You're making this too complicated." At work, you point out the flaw in a plan, and suddenly, the problem is not the plan. The problem is your attitude. In a family conversation, you set a boundary and they do not hear protection. They hear betrayal. This is not random. It is defense. Daniel Kahneman described two modes of thinking, one fast, emotional, automatic, the other slow, deliberate, logical. You are trying to use slow reasoning. They are using fast, emotional defense. Your argument has not even reached their reason yet. It has been stopped at the gate by ego. That is why more logic does not help. More logic only feels like a larger attack. And if pride is already fighting for survival, every fact you add becomes another weapon they believe you are using against them. This is the part intelligent people learn too late. You cannot reason someone out of a position they are using to feel safe. So what do? You stop feeding the friction. A stubborn person does not always want truth. They want resistance. Resistance makes them feel important. Every time you react, you tell them their argument deserves your nervous system. Every time you correct them, you give their confusion a stage. Every time you get angry, you hand them proof that they have power over you. Schopenhauer would not tell you to counter every foolish point. That is the trap of the intelligent person. You hear something wrong, and your mind reaches for the weapon of correction. But correction is only useful when the other person has the humility to receive it. Without that humility, your correction becomes oxygen, and their ego becomes the fire. So cut the oxygen, not with weakness, with discipline. In a comment section, do not write the fourth paragraph. In a phone call with a difficult client, do not defend your intelligence for 20 minutes. Redirect, clarify the outcome, end the loop. When a family member starts the same old rant, do not walk into the same old courtroom. Say, "I hear you." Then step back. Use short sentences. That's one way to look at it. "You may be right. Interesting. I'll think about it. Have a nice day." Okay. These are not admissions of defeat. They are exits. They are doors. They are ways of refusing to turn your intelligence into free labor for someone else's denial. High IQ people do not prove their intelligence by talking longer. They prove it by recognizing when the conversation has become a trap. You do not starve stupidity by proving it wrong. You starve it by refusing to perform for it. And the first time you do this, it may feel strange, almost wrong. Because part of you still wants the satisfaction, the concession, the moment where they finally say, "You were right, let that go." That moment is usually the bait. Protect your mind. But what if you cannot walk away? What if the person committed to being wrong is not a stranger in a comment section? What if it is your boss, your manager, your client, your parent, your administrator, the person who signs your paycheck, reviews your performance, controls your promotion, writes the policy, or decides whether the family stays calm tonight? This is where the game changes. The most dangerous, stupid person is not the loud one. It is the insecure one with authority. Because when a fragile ego has power, your intelligence is no longer seen as contribution. It is seen as threat. You think you are being useful. They feel exposed. You think you are protecting the project. They feel challenged. You think you are bringing clarity. They feel you holding up a mirror to their inadequacy. And a person with power can punish the mirror. This is why intelligent people get fired for insights. This is why a company can ignore the person who sees the collapse coming, then fall apart a year later from the exact incompetence that person warned about. This is why a teacher can see the absurdity of a school policy before the administrators do. This is why someone in a military, corporate, or technical environment can bring an assessment, a warning, a pattern, and receive nothing but "I disagree." No analysis, no counter-evidence, just ego wearing authority. Schopenhauer understood this cruelty. Mediocrity does not always admire intelligence. Often, it experiences intelligence as an accusation. So do not humiliate a powerful fool in public. Do not try to win inside their castle. Do not display brilliance where insecurity is looking for a reason to strike. Ask questions. Make them define the outcome. Make them put the decision in writing. Document what was said. Ask for written clarity. Give them small ownership when needed. Protect your position. Build leverage. Build an exit. This is not cowardice. This is timing. The old lesson behind Sima Yi was never simply pretend to be weak. The deeper lesson was this: a concealed mind survives longer than a celebrated one in the presence of insecure power. When a fragile ego has power, intelligence must become timing. Not every room deserves your full mind. Some rooms only deserve your strategy. But there are moments when you cannot leave, and silence is not enough. So you stop attacking the foolish idea directly. You let it reveal itself. When someone makes an absolute claim, do not rush to disprove every detail. That is how they pull you into the mud. Instead, take their idea seriously for 3 more steps than they did. Ask calmly, if that is true, what happens next? Would that apply in every case? What would you do if the consequence landed on you? How would this work in practice? This is not sarcasm. Sarcasm gives them another reason to make you the problem. This is pressure applied to the structure of their thought. If a coworker says, anyone could do this job, do not launch into a speech about skill. Ask, then what would happen if the whole team stopped training? If a relative says, I'm never wrong, do not fight the statement. Ask, then how would repair ever happen in this family? If a client demands something impossible, do not defend yourself for 20 minutes. Ask, what outcome do you want, and what trade-off are you willing to accept? Do not attack the foolish idea. Let it walk far enough to reveal its own shape. The point is not to humiliate them. The point is to stop doing all the thinking for them. A defended ego lives on vague certainty. Make it enter reality. Make it face sequence. Make it meet consequence. Then step back. The idea will often begin collapsing without you having to touch it. But the hardest person to stop explaining yourself to is not always the boss, the client, or the stranger online. Sometimes it is your mother, your father, your spouse, your ex, your sibling, your step-parent. The person whose voice got inside your nervous system before you were old enough to defend yourself from it. And this is where Schopenhauer's coldness is not enough by itself, because in a family, you are not only trying to win an argument. You are trying to be seen. You are not only trying to correct a fact, you are trying to prove that your mind deserves to be taken seriously. That is why you keep going back. That is why you explain the same boundary in 5 different ways. That is why you stay in the conversation long after your body knows it is over. The topic is not really the topic. The topic is the old hope underneath it. Maybe if they understand this, they will understand me. Maybe if I say it perfectly, they will stop calling me cold. Maybe if I explain one more time, my father will admit he was wrong. Maybe my mother will stop playing the victim. Maybe my spouse will stop turning every fact into a fight. Maybe this family will finally hear a boundary without treating it like betrayal. This is the deepest form of the trap, because you are no longer arguing with a statement. You are arguing with a history. You are arguing with guilt. You are arguing with the child inside you that still wants one impossible sentence, I understand you. And some people will never give you that sentence. Not because you failed to earn it, because they would have to lose the identity they built around never being wrong. This is why appeasement is dangerous when it becomes a lifestyle. Appeasement can avoid one argument. It can keep one dinner calm. It can get you through one phone call. But appeasement over years can turn you into furniture inside someone else's delusion. You nod, you smile, you shrink. They grow more certain. And one day you realize peace was not created, only your voice was removed. So use distance, use short answers, use strategy, but do not confuse lifelong self-erasure with wisdom. A boundary does not need their agreement to become real. You do not need their permission to stop explaining. You do not need their understanding to protect yourself. The hardest person to stop explaining yourself to is often the person you once hoped would finally understand you. That hope may be human, but if you keep feeding it to a defended ego, it will eat years of your life. But there is one distinction you must not miss. Schopenhauer helps you see that many arguments are ego traps, but not every silence is wisdom. Sometimes silence is discipline. Sometimes silence is fear wearing a calm face. So ask one question before you walk away. What is at stake? If the only thing being threatened is your ego, leave. If someone misunderstands you, insults your intelligence, misreads your tone, or refuses to admit you are right, let the argument die. Your pride is not an emergency. Your nervous system is not a courtroom. But if safety is at stake, act. If health is at stake, act. If a child, a patient, a team, a future, a legal risk, a financial decision, or someone vulnerable is about to be harmed, silence is no longer detachment. It is avoidance. Do not confuse peace with passivity. When real harm is involved, the intelligent move is not to argue harder, it is to move smarter. Document, create a paper trail, ask for written decisions, make the risk visible, escalate when necessary. Bring in a third party. Protect the vulnerable. Leave when the system demands that you sacrifice your integrity to protect someone else's ego. This is where intelligence becomes discipline. You do not fight every fool. You do not correct every false sentence. You do not turn every room into a trial. But you also do not abandon reality when reality has consequences. Walk away when ego is the only thing at stake. Step in when harm is. The question is not, should I always speak or always stay silent? That is a childish question. The real question is, what is at stake? Because a high IQ mind is not proven by constant debate, it is proven by discernment. Knowing when a conversation is a trap. Knowing when silence is strength. And knowing when silence would make you part of the damage. Now comes the hardest part. Not dealing with them. Dealing with the part of you that still wants them to admit you were right. That is the hidden addiction of many intelligent people. You do not only want truth to win, you want truth to be recognized. You want the foolish person to pause, look at you, and finally say, I see it now. I was wrong. You were right. But Schopenhauer would call this another form of stupidity. Seeking validation from someone committed to misunderstanding you is not wisdom. It is self-betrayal with better vocabulary. You cannot keep handing your reality to people who need to distort it in order to survive themselves. You cannot keep making your peace dependent on the confession of a defended ego. The real victory is not making them admit you are right. The real victory is no longer needing them to. Schopenhauer can teach you distance. He can teach you that truth has no value in certain rooms. He can teach you to stop bleeding energy into minds that convert honesty into insult. But here is where Psyche-Life must add a second warning. Do not let distance become contempt, because if you use intelligence only to look down on people, you have not escaped ego. You have only found a more elegant version of it. Schopenhauer gives the brutal truth, but brutality is not the whole map. High IQ is not a mission to repair every mind around you. It is not a license to despise people. It is not a throne. It is a responsibility, a discipline. The discipline to know which conversations deserve your full mind, which conversations require a quiet exit, which conversations require documentation, boundaries, or action, and which conversations are simply begging for your reaction so they can keep themselves alive. So stop feeding them. Stop donating your nervous system. Stop turning your clarity into free labor for someone else's denial. High IQ is not the need to win every argument. It is the discipline to leave some arguments unfed. Protect your mind, but do not harden your heart. That is the line. That is the real work. And that is where being right finally becomes being free. If this video named something you have been living through, comment one sentence below. I stopped explaining when, not for drama, for clarity. And if you want more psychological maps of high intelligence through philosophy, psychology, ego, loneliness, and emotional restraint, subscribe to Psyche-Life. Schopenhauer gives us the brutal truth, but he is not the whole map.